At dawn, Iran does not look like a headline. It looks like light moving across a mountain wall. It looks like a shepherd guiding animals over a high plateau, a baker pressing dough against the hot surface of a clay oven, and a shopkeeper lifting the metal door of a bazaar that has opened in one form or another for centuries. It looks like snow above Tehran, mist in the forests near the Caspian Sea, salt shining on a southern island, and blue tiles slowly becoming visible as the sun rises over an old mosque. For much of the world, Iran arrives through a narrow frame. The country is discussed through politics, conflict, sanctions, revolution, oil, and the language of crisis. Those realities are part of its modern story, and they cannot simply be erased, but they are not the entire story. Behind that frame is a civilization whose influence has moved across continents, a land of ancient empires, desert engineering, poetry, gardens, mathematics, architecture, music, trade, faith, and memory. Iran covers about 1,650,000 square kilometers. The word Persian carries enormous cultural weight, but not every Iranian is Persian. Azerbaijani, Kurdish, Lur, Arab, Baluch, Turkmen, Gilak, Mazandarani, Armenian, Assyrian, Jewish, Zoroastrian, and many other communities have shaped the country. Persian, or Farsi, connects much of the population, while other languages, accents, memories, and regional identities continue around it. Iran is also a place where time seems to overlap. In one direction stand the stone stairways of Persepolis, created for kings more than 2,000 years ago. In another rises the traffic and concrete of Tehran, a modern megacity pressed against the Alborz Mountains. A family may read verses by Hafez at home, follow global technology on a smartphone, prepare an ancient New Year table, and discuss the future over tea, all within the same evening. To travel through Iran, even through images, is to discover that contradiction is not an exception here. It is part of the country's character. Iran can be severe and tender, dry and green, deeply traditional and intensely modern. Its cities can feel formal in public and intimate in private. Its monuments speak of imperial power, while its poetry repeatedly warns that power is temporary. Its deserts appear empty, yet contain old roads, villages, shrines, water systems, and the traces of vanished caravans. One question will guide this journey. How has a civilization survived invasion, drought, religious transformation, revolution, war, and the pressure of competing empires, without losing the sense that it is still itself? Iran's answer has rarely been simple resistance. Again and again, it has absorbed change, reshaped it, and made it Iranian. That ability has produced extraordinary beauty. It has also produced contradictions that beauty cannot erase. This is not an attempt to replace today's headlines with a romantic postcard. It is an attempt to widen the frame until the ruins, the restrictions, the gardens, the grief, the humor, and the ordinary human lives can all be seen together. Because Iran is not only a state on a map, it is an archive of human adaptation. It is a bridge between worlds, and beneath the noise of the present, an older voice is still speaking. To understand Iran, begin with the land. The country sits at a meeting point between West Asia, Central Asia, the Caucasus, South Asia, and the maritime world of the Indian Ocean. For thousands of years, armies, merchants, pilgrims, migrants, scholars, and ideas have passed along its edges and through its valleys. Yet Iran is not an open plain. Much of it is protected, divided, and shaped by mountains. In the north, the Alborz Range rises sharply between the Central Plateau and the Caspian coast. Mount Damavand, Iran's highest mountain and a great volcanic peak, stands above the range like a national symbol. In Persian mythology, mountains are more than geology. They are places of refuge, struggle, imprisonment, revelation, and heroic memory. Damavand appears in literature as a landscape where myth and nature meet. To the west and southwest, the Zagros Mountains stretch for more than 1,000 kilometers. Their long ridges have helped form regional cultures and patterns of settlement. Valleys that appear close on a map can feel separate on the ground. For centuries, seasonal movement through these highlands shaped the lives of pastoral communities, including Lur, Kurdish, Bakhtiari, and Kashkai groups. Even today, the mountains preserve distinct music, clothing, architecture, and ways of life. Between these ranges lies the Iranian Plateau, a vast world of cities, farms, dry basins, salt flats, and deserts. The Dasht-e-Kavir, often called the Great Salt Desert, occupies much of the north-central interior. Farther southeast lies the Lut Desert, where wind has sculpted enormous ridges and towers known as kaluts. From the air, they resemble the ruined streets of a city built by another civilization. In reality, they are monuments created by erosion, heat, and time. Yet the popular image of Iran as a single desert is misleading. North of the Alborz, the climate changes dramatically. Moisture from the Caspian Sea supports green lowlands, rice fields, tea plantations, wetlands, and the ancient Hyrcanian forests. In winter, snow covers mountain villages and ski slopes. In the southwest, broad plains meet rivers and date palms. In the south, the coast opens toward the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, where fishing, shipbuilding, trade, and seafaring have shaped communities for generations. Geography also creates one of Iran's deepest tensions. The country contains great environmental variety, but much of its territory is arid or semi-arid. Water has always required careful management. Ancient communities learned to capture snowmelt, guide underground streams, build reservoirs, and organize shared access. In the modern era, population growth, expanding cities, intensive agriculture, drought, and climate pressure have made water one of the country's most urgent challenges. Iran is not one landscape. It is many landscapes held together by a difficult, beautiful geography. And every civilization that rose here had to learn the same lesson. Survival begins with reading the land. But before Iran became famous for kings, armies, and palaces, its people had to solve a more basic problem. How do you build a lasting civilization in a land where water is never guaranteed? The answer is hidden beneath the desert. In the center of the Iranian plateau, Yazd rises from the desert in the same colors as the earth. From a rooftop, the old city appears as a landscape of mud brick walls, domes, minarets, courtyards, and wind catchers. Nothing seems separate from the environment. The buildings do not fight the desert with glass and steel. They negotiate with it. The narrow lanes are often high-walled and partly covered. They create shade and protect pedestrians from sun, wind, and dust. The irregular pattern can feel like a maze, but it responds to climate, privacy, and neighborhood life. Behind plain exterior walls, houses open inward around courtyards with trees, pools, and planted beds. The most distinctive feature is the badgir, or wind catcher. These towers rise above rooftops and capture moving air, Internal channels guide the breeze downward into rooms, sometimes passing over water to create additional cooling. Different shapes respond to local wind patterns. In an age of mechanical air conditioning, the Badgear appears almost futuristic, a passive technology built from close observation of climate. Water reaches Yazd through qanats, some extending over great distances. Cisterns store supplies beneath domed roofs. Public access points once allowed residents to collect water at different levels. The system tied engineering to community organization. Wealthy patrons funded infrastructure, while neighborhoods depended on shared maintenance. The Jame Mosque of Yazd rises above the old city, with tall minarets and a richly tiled entrance. Its blue surfaces seem almost impossible against the surrounding earth tones. The contrast is one of the city's great visual experiences. The desert's muted palette, interrupted by a gateway of intense color. Yazd has survived because its architecture is not merely beautiful. It works. It is the physical record of generations learning where to place a wall, how to direct air, how to share water, and how to create comfort with limited resources. As evening cools the rooftops, the wind catchers become silhouettes. The call to prayer moves across the old city. Somewhere below, water continues through a dark underground channel. Yazd offers a lesson that reaches far beyond Iran. In the harshest landscapes, survival depends not on dominating nature, but on understanding it. The qanat reveals the pattern that will appear throughout this story. Iranian civilization often survives by making the invisible essential. Water travels underground. Private life develops behind plain walls. Meaning hides inside poetry. Identity continues beneath the governments and dynasties that claim to define it. Follow those underground channels into the modern age, and the scale changes completely. The desert city becomes the metropolis. The shared courtyard becomes the apartment tower. The argument over survival becomes an argument about how millions of people can live beneath the same mountains. Tehran is often the first place where the outside world meets Iran, and the first place where simple expectations begin to fail. From a distance, the city spreads across the southern foothills of the Alborz Mountains, a vast field of towers, highways, apartment blocks, parks, and neighborhoods. On clear winter days, snow-covered peaks appear almost unreal behind the city. At street level, Tehran is restless. Cars press into traffic. Motorcycles slip between lanes. The metro carries students, workers, families, and vendors beneath the city. Billboards rise above bakeries, pharmacies, electronics shops, and old houses hidden behind walls. Tehran was not always the center of Iranian power. For most of the country's long history, other cities, Susa, Ekbatana, Ctesiphon, Shiraz, Tabriz, Kazvin, and Isfahan, held greater political or cultural importance. Tehran became the capital under the Qajar dynasty at the end of the 18th century. Since then, it has grown from a modest settlement into the country's largest urban center. The city tells its story in layers. In the historic center, the Golistan Palace reflects the world of the Qajar court. Mirrorwork, painted tiles, royal halls, gardens, and European-influenced decoration reveal a monarchy negotiating between Persian traditions and changing global tastes. Nearby, the Grand Bazaar forms a different kind of city. Long covered passages filled with carpets, spices, metalwork, clothing, jewelry, household goods, and the constant movement of commerce. Farther north, the streets climb toward wealthier districts and cooler air. Modern towers, galleries, restaurants, shopping centers, and hillside parks look toward the mountains. Between north and south are countless Tehrans, each with its own social rhythm. There is the Tehran of universities and research institutes, the Tehran of industrial workshops, the Tehran of artists and filmmakers, the Tehran of football crowds, the Tehran of crowded family apartments, and the Tehran of late-night conversations that continue long after the tea has gone cold. But Tehran is not defined by monuments alone. Its energy lives in smaller scenes. A bookseller wraps a volume of poetry for a customer. Friends gather in a cafe and debate cinema, migration, work, music, and politics. Families picnic in public parks. Vendors sell roasted beets and hot corn in winter. Mountaineers leave before sunrise for trails above the city. At home, guests remove their shoes, sit close together, and are offered fruit, sweets, nuts, and tea, often more than they can politely refuse. Tehran can feel exhausting. Air pollution, traffic, high living costs, and rapid expansion place pressure on daily life. The city has absorbed millions of people from every region of the country, creating opportunity, but also inequality. Old neighborhoods disappear beneath new construction. Water and infrastructure struggle to serve a population far larger than earlier planners imagined. Yet Tehran also reveals the adaptability of Iranian society. It is where regional identities meet, where tradition is reinterpreted, and where the future is argued over every day. The capital does not present a single unified image of Iran. Instead, it presents the country as a conversation, crowded, unfinished, contradictory, and alive. And above it all, the Alborz Mountains remain visible, reminding the city that even the most modern capital is still living beneath an ancient landscape. Tehran is where the country's deepest timelines collide. Ancient symbols appear in modern architecture. Religious authority shares the streets with private skepticism. Global culture arrives through filtered networks. Ambition grows beside inflation, pollution, and uncertainty. If Iran is a conversation, Tehran is the room where everyone seems to be speaking at once. Yet the capital is young compared with the civilization it governs. To understand the source of Iran's historical confidence, the road must turn south, toward a plain where a solitary tomb marks the beginning of an empire. In the 6th century BCE, a ruler from the southwest of the Iranian plateau changed the political map of the ancient world. His name was Cyrus. Known to history as Cyrus the Great, he defeated the Median king, expanded into Anatolia, conquered Babylon, and created the foundation of the Achaemenid Empire. Under Cyrus and his successors, Persian rule would extend across a territory of extraordinary size, from parts of Central Asia and the Indus region to Egypt, Anatolia, and the Eastern Mediterranean. The achievement was not simply military. Conquest can create territory, but it does not automatically create a functioning empire. The Achaemenids governed lands containing many languages, religions, legal traditions, and local elites. Their system depended on negotiation as much as force. Regional administration, tribute, roads, messengers, military organization, royal symbolism, and the careful presentation of the king as ruler of many peoples. At Pasargadae, the first dynastic capital, the landscape feels open and restrained. Stone platforms and fragments of palaces stand across a broad plain. The structures are not as overwhelming as Persepolis, but their simplicity gives them power. Here, Persian architecture was already combining influences from across the empire. Stoneworking traditions, column forms, garden planning, and decorative ideas were brought together into a new royal language. At the center of the site stands the tomb, traditionally identified as that of Cyrus. Its design is simple, a small stone chamber raised above a series of massive steps. There is no forest of columns, no wall of carved armies, no visible display of treasure. The monument depends on proportion and isolation. Against the surrounding plain, it appears both human in scale and timeless. Cyrus has been remembered in many different ways. Ancient Greek writers sometimes described him as an ideal ruler. Biblical tradition presents him as the conqueror who allowed exiled communities, including the Jews in Babylon, to return and restore their religious life. In modern Iran, he has become a symbol interpreted through history, nationalism, identity, and political debate. The famous Cyrus cylinder, discovered in Babylon and now held by the British Museum, records the king's conquest and his presentation of legitimate rule in the language of Mesopotamian kingship. It is often celebrated in popular culture as an early declaration of human rights, though historians caution that it belongs to the political and religious conventions of its own time. Its importance does not require modern mythology. The document remains a remarkable object from a moment when Persian power entered the center of the ancient Near East. The empire's power depended on diversity. Soldiers, officials, builders, sailors, farmers, scribes, and craftspeople came from many regions. Imperial art did not simply erase local cultures. Instead, it arranged them around the figure of the king. This idea would reach its most spectacular form at Persepolis. But before we climb its stairways, Pasargadae offers a quieter lesson. Great empires often announce themselves through noise. Here, power is expressed through space. A tomb on a plain, palace foundations under open sky, and the remains of gardens that once turned dry land into an image of order. The Persian garden, which would later influence landscapes from Spain to India, begins with a simple dream: water, shade, geometry, and life created against an arid horizon. At Pasargadae, empire and garden were already part of the same vision. The popular image of Cyrus as a modern champion of human rights goes beyond what an ancient royal inscription can prove, but the deeper achievement remains. He and his successors learned to rule difference without requiring every subject to become the same. That was not tolerance in the modern democratic sense. It was imperial strategy, yet it produced a political idea that would shape how Persian power presented itself for centuries. Many peoples, one order. At Pasargadae, that idea is quiet. At Persepolis, it becomes theatre. Persepolis rises at the foot of a mountain in Fars province, not far from the modern city of Shiraz. Even in ruin, it feels theatrical. A monumental staircase leads upward to a terrace cut and built against the slope. Tall columns stand against the sky. Doorways frame empty rooms. Winged creatures guard entrances. Across the stone walls, lines of carved figures advance with gifts in their hands. The city was begun, under Darius the Great, around the end of the 6th century BCE, and expanded by later kings. It was not an ordinary capital, filled with the daily life of a large population. Persepolis functioned as a ceremonial center, a royal stage where the empire represented itself. The most revealing images appear on the stairways of the Apadana, the great audience hall. Delegations from across the empire are shown approaching the king. Their clothing, hairstyles, weapons, animals, and gifts identify different regions. Some bring textiles, others lead horses, camels or exotic animals. Some carry vessels or valuable materials. The figures are carefully ordered, but they are not shown as chaotic captives. They appear as distinct peoples participating in an imperial ceremony. This was political art. It presented an ideal world in which diversity was peaceful because it was organized beneath royal authority. Reality was undoubtedly more complicated. Empires depend on taxation, hierarchy, military force, and the suppression of rebellion. Yet the reliefs remain extraordinary because they preserve visual evidence of how the Achaemenid court wanted power to be understood, not as the destruction of difference, but as the arrangement of difference. In 330 BCE, Alexander of Macedon captured Persepolis. Parts of the palace complex were burned. Ancient sources disagree about whether the destruction was a deliberate act of revenge, a political statement, or the result of a drunken celebration. Whatever the motive, the fire became one of history's most symbolic moments. The ceremonial heart of the Persian Empire consumed after the conquest of its ruling dynasty. But destruction did not erase memory. For centuries, local people remained aware that the ruins belonged to ancient kings, even when the original inscriptions could no longer be read. The site gathered legends and new names. In the modern period, archaeology revealed more of its history, while Persepolis became a central symbol of Iranian heritage. As sunset moves across the columns, the monument appears almost weightless. Shadows lengthen. Tourists grow quiet. The carved delegations continue their endless approach. They carry gifts for a king who is no longer there. The fire destroyed palaces, but it did not end Iranian civilization. This is the first great reversal in the story. The state fell. The identity continued. New rulers arrived. New religions spread. New languages gained power. And still, the Iranian world repeatedly found ways to translate change into continuity. Religion in Iran is often discussed only through the institutions of the present, but the spiritual history of the land is far older and more varied. One of the most influential traditions to emerge from the Iranian world is Zoroastrianism, associated with the teachings of Zarathustra, known in the West as Zoroaster. The exact period in which he lived remains debated, but his ideas shaped Iranian religious life for centuries and became closely connected with several pre-Islamic dynasties. Zoroastrian thought emphasizes the moral importance of choice, often expressed through the ideal of good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. Fire holds a central place as a symbol of purity, truth, and divine light. It is not worshipped as a god. Rather, it serves as a visible focus for prayer and reflection. The Arab-Muslim conquest of the 7th century transformed Iran, but it did not produce a simple erasure of the past. Over time, Islam became the dominant religion, while Persian language and culture re-emerged with extraordinary strength. Iranian scholars, poets, administrators, theologians, artists, and scientists became central to the development of Islamic civilization. Iran's religious history within Islam is also complex. Different dynasties supported different traditions. Sufi orders shaped literature and spiritual practice. Sunni scholarship flourished in many regions. From the 16th century, the Safavid dynasty established Twelver Shi'ism as the state religion, a decision that profoundly influenced Iran's political and cultural identity. Yet Iran's religious landscape includes much more. Armenian Christian communities maintain historic churches, especially in the northwest and in Isfahan's New Julfa district. Assyrian Christians preserve ancient traditions. Jewish communities have lived in Iranian lands for more than 2,000 years, with synagogues and pilgrimage sites in several cities. Zoroastrians continue to practice their faith, and other communities contribute to the country's social fabric. The relationship among religion, government, law, and personal belief is one of the most debated aspects of modern Iranian life. Public rules do not reveal the full diversity of private conviction. Some people are deeply observant. Others relate to religion through family, culture, or national tradition. Some question or reject institutional authority. Many hold combinations of belief that do not fit simple categories. This complexity is reflected in art and poetry. Persian literature often speaks in the language of the sacred, while challenging religious hypocrisy. The tavern, the garden, the beloved, the wine cup, the pilgrim, and the preacher become symbols with multiple meanings. A poem may sound romantic, mystical, rebellious, or all three at once. In Iran, faith is not only found in grand shrines, it is found in a small bowl of food, given in memory of the dead, a candle lit in a church, a whispered prayer before travel, a family gathering at a grave, a verse recited during uncertainty, or a flame protected through generations. The country's spiritual history cannot be reduced to one doctrine. It is a long conversation about truth, power, mortality, justice, and the human desire to find light in a difficult world. After the Arab-Muslim conquest, Persian did not simply disappear into Arabic. It returned as one of the great literary languages of the Islamic world. Iranian scholars helped shape philosophy, medicine, astronomy, theology, administration, mathematics, and poetry, far beyond the borders of modern Iran. Conquest changed the country, but the country also changed the civilization that conquered it. Centuries later, the Safavids would make Twelver Shi'ism central to the state and give Iran a religious identity distinct from many of its neighbors. They also built a capital designed to make power visible from every direction. There is an old Persian expression, Isfahan is half the world. The phrase is an exaggeration, but standing in Nakshi Jahan Square, it becomes easy to understand why generations believed it. In the late 16th century, Shah Abbas I made Isfahan the capital of the Safavid Empire. He reshaped the city into a statement of political power, commercial ambition, religious identity, and artistic refinement. The result remains one of the great urban ensembles of the world. Nakshe Jahan means image of the world. The square is vast, framed by arcades and anchored by four major elements: the Shah Mosque, now commonly called the Imam Mosque, the Sheikh Lotfollah Mosque, the Ali Kapu Palace, and the entrance to the Grand Bazaar. Together, they represent religion, monarchy, commerce, and public life. Inside, geometry becomes atmosphere. Tile work covers domes, walls, and vaults with patterns of deep blue, turquoise, white, yellow, and green. Calligraphy moves across surfaces as both text and decoration. Light changes the colors through the day. Under the Great Dome, sound can gather and return, turning a single voice into a spatial experience. Across the square, the Sheikh Lotfollah Mosque is smaller and more intimate. It was created for the royal court and has no large courtyard or minarets. Its dome changes color with the light, moving from cream to rose and gold. Inside, the decoration becomes increasingly complex until the eye seems to lose the boundary between architecture and pattern. The Zayandeh River historically gave the city another public world. Bridges such as Sayosepol and Kaju were not only crossings, they were gathering places, architectural promenades, and spaces where water, music, light, and social life came together. Long dry periods and reduced flow have increasingly transformed the riverbed into a painful symbol of Iran's environmental crisis. The bridges remain beautiful, but their meaning changes when the water disappears. Isfahan also reflects religious and cultural diversity. Shah Abbas relocated Armenian merchants and craftspeople to a district called New Julfa. There, the Vank Cathedral combines Christian imagery with Persian decorative traditions. Biblical scenes cover the interior, while the surrounding neighborhood became a center of trade, printing, and Armenian community life. Isfahan's beauty is not accidental. It was designed to communicate order. Water channels divided gardens. Avenues created long perspectives. Domes and gateways controlled attention. The city turned urban planning into political theater. Yet the most memorable moments may be the quietest. Pigeons circling a dome, a craftsman drawing a line with a fine brush, families sitting on the grass at dusk, or footsteps echoing beneath an old bridge. Isfahan does not merely preserve architecture, it preserves an idea, the idea that a city can be composed like a poem, where every element gains meaning from its relationship to the whole. But Isfahan contains a warning inside its perfection. A city designed around water becomes vulnerable when the river fails. A square built to display political order continues after the empire that created it is gone. The monument survives, but its meaning changes with each generation that walks through it. If Isfahan shows how rulers composed a city, Shiraz shows how poets composed a civilization. Shiraz is a city remembered through fragrance. In spring, the scent of bitter orange blossoms moves through gardens and streets. Roses open beside pools. Cypress trees cast narrow shadows. The air itself seems connected to the poetry that made Shiraz famous. For many Iranians, poetry is not a distant literary subject. It is part of conversation, ceremony, memory, and everyday expression. Verses are recited at weddings, funerals, family gatherings, and moments of uncertainty. Lines written centuries ago still provide language for love, grief, patience, injustice, and hope. Hafez, writing in the 14th century, created lyric poetry of extraordinary ambiguity. His ghazals speak of love, wine, beauty, loss, spiritual longing, hypocrisy, and freedom. The beloved may be human or divine. The tavern may be a real place or a symbol of liberation from false piety. The poem refuses to settle into one meaning. At the tomb of Hafez, visitors gather from morning until late evening. Some place a hand on the stone, others read quietly. Young couples sit in the garden. Families open the divan of Hafez and seek guidance from a randomly chosen verse, a tradition known as Fal-e-Hafez. The poet is not treated as a figure trapped in the past. He remains part of the emotional life of the present. Shiraz's gardens reflect the same cultural imagination. Persian gardens are organized spaces of water, shade, geometry, fragrance, and symbolic order. In an arid climate, a garden is never simply decoration. It is a vision of abundance, created through engineering and care. The Iram Garden, with its trees, flowers, channels, and pavilion, offers one version of this ideal. Water directs the eye and cools the air. Cypress trees suggest endurance. Fruit trees provide scent and food. Walls protect the interior world from dust and noise. One of Shiraz's most photographed monuments is the Nasir al-Mulk Mosque, often called the Pink Mosque. In the morning, sunlight passes through stained glass windows and spreads red, blue, green, and yellow patterns across carpets and columns. The spectacle lasts only as long as the angle of light allows. It is architecture designed to change with time. Still, Shiraz carries a special emotional authority. It represents a version of Iran in which beauty is not luxury, but resistance to time. Kings vanish, empires fall, gardens dry and are replanted. Yet a line of poetry can cross centuries and arrive intact in the voice of someone reading beneath the evening sky. Iranian poetry has lasted partly because it refuses to be only one thing. A verse can be devotional and rebellious, intimate and political, playful and tragic. It allows people separated by centuries to recognize the same human weaknesses: vanity, fear, longing, hypocrisy, and the desire to be free. Yet the Iran imagined abroad is often reduced to desert, domes, and poetry. Cross the Alborz Mountains, and even the color of the country changes. Beyond the northern wall of the Alborz Mountains, Iran changes color. The air becomes humid. Forest covers the slopes. Rivers move toward the Caspian Sea. Rice fields reflect the sky. Tea grows in rows across green hills. For travelers arriving from the Central Plateau, the transformation can feel like entering another country. The Hyrcanian forests form an ancient band along the southern Caspian region. Their ecological history reaches back millions of years, preserving plant communities that survived major climatic changes. Broad-leaved trees, dense undergrowth, streams, and mist create landscapes rarely associated with popular images of Iran. The provinces of Gilan and Mazandaran are known for agricultural abundance. Rice, tea, citrus fruit, olives, garlic, herbs, and fish shape regional cuisine. Food in the north often uses sour flavors, fresh greens, walnuts, pomegranate, and local vegetables. Dishes can taste very different from the grilled meats and saffron rice most outsiders associate with Iranian cooking. Village architecture responds to heavy rain and humidity. Traditional houses may use timber, raised floors, sloped roofs, and deep balconies. In mountain settlements, homes adapt to steep terrain. The famous village of Masuleh is built into a slope so dramatically that the roof of one house can serve as the walkway for another. Buildings follow the mountain rather than flattening it. Local identity is strong. Gilaki and Mazandarani languages, music, clothing, dance, agricultural traditions, and social customs distinguish the region. Markets display smoked fish, pickled vegetables, herbs, fruit, woven baskets, and colorful household goods. Women have long played visible roles in farming and local commerce, and bright regional clothing remains part of cultural memory and celebration. The green north complicates the idea of Iran as a dry land. It also shows how mountains create separate ecological worlds within short distances. On one side of the Alborz, Tehran faces dust, water stress, and semi-arid slopes. On the other, clouds gather over dense forest. In the early morning, mist moves through the trees. Farmers step into flooded rice fields. Tea leaves are gathered on hillsides. A wooden house looks out over a valley hidden by cloud. This is Iran too, not a desert kingdom, but a green world between mountains and sea. The forest is more than a surprise. It is evidence that Iran has never been one ecological or cultural world. Mountains do not merely decorate the map. They divide rainfall, languages, economies, and memories. Beyond the next pass, another Iran begins. Iran's northwest has always faced outward. Close to the Caucasus, Anatolia, and the routes leading toward Europe, the region has absorbed and transmitted cultures for centuries. Its cities have served as capitals, commercial centers, military frontiers, and gateways between empires. Tabriz stands at the center of this story. The city has repeatedly risen, fallen, and rebuilt itself after earthquakes, invasions, and political change. It served as a capital under several dynasties and played a major role in trade, connecting Iran to the Ottoman world, the Caucasus, Russia, and beyond. The historic Bazaar of Tabriz is one of the largest covered market complexes in the world. It is not a single hall, but a network of domed passages, courtyards, caravanserais, workshops, mosques, schools, and specialized sections. Carpets, leather, jewelry, spices, dried fruit, clothing, and household goods move through spaces shaped by centuries of commerce. Tabriz was especially important during the Persian constitutional revolution of the early 20th century, when Iranians demanded limits on royal power and the creation of a representative legal order. The city's merchants, intellectuals, and activists became central to the struggle. That history remains part of Tabriz's civic identity. The region is largely Azerbaijani-speaking, and Azerbaijani Turkish is widely heard alongside Persian. Music, food, humor, family traditions, and local pride give the Northwest a distinct character. This is one of the clearest examples of why Iranian identity cannot be reduced to Persian ethnicity alone. Many Azerbaijani Iranians have been deeply influential in the country's politics, religion, literature, military history, trade, and culture. Farther north and west, historic Armenian monasteries stand in rugged landscapes, and their stone churches and fortified walls reflect centuries of Christian presence, pilgrimage, and cultural exchange. Armenian communities have been part of Iranian history for generations, even as borders and political powers changed around them. This borderland character extends into Kurdish regions to the south and west. Mountain communities preserve distinctive languages, music, dance, dress, and oral traditions. In Hawraman, villages cling to steep slopes, and terraced architecture follows the contours of the land. Seasonal movement, agriculture, and kinship have shaped a cultural landscape adapted to difficult mountain conditions. The Northwest is a reminder that borders on modern maps are recent compared with the movement of peoples. Families, languages, songs, and trade routes often extend across frontiers. Iranian culture did not develop behind sealed walls. It grew through contact. At sunset, the brick domes of the Tabriz Bazaar darken one by one. Shopkeepers close wooden doors. Outside, the mountains turn violet. The road continues toward the Caucasus, Anatolia, and the long history of exchange that made this region one of Iran's great crossroads. The Northwest challenges another familiar simplification, the idea that Iranian identity must be ethnically uniform. It has never been. Iran's history is a history of peoples connected by institutions, trade, literature, faith, conflict, and shared political experience, while still preserving different languages and local loyalties. Now the journey turns from the mountain borderlands to the sea, toward the narrow waterway that so often pulls Iran back into the headlines. At Iran's southern edge, the plateau meets the sea. The Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman connect Iran to a maritime world extending toward Arabia, East Africa, India, and the wider Indian Ocean. For centuries, sailors from ports along this coast carried goods, languages, music, food, and stories across the water. Bandar Abbas is one of the main gateways to the south. The city is hot, busy, and outward-looking. Ferries move between mainland ports and islands. Markets sell fabric, spices, fish, electronics, and imported goods. Clothing becomes lighter and more colorful. The sound of southern music introduces rhythms shaped by seafaring and cultural exchange. Off the coast lies Keshmem, the largest island in the Persian Gulf. Its landscapes are dramatically different from the famous cities of central Iran. Wind and water have carved canyons, valleys, caves, and strange rock formations. The island's salt structures, including the Namakdan salt cave system, reveal the geological forces beneath the surface. Mangrove forests grow in tidal waters between Keshem and the mainland. At high tide, small boats move among the trees. Birds feed in the wetlands. The mangroves protect coastlines and support marine life, creating a green world in a region defined by heat and salt. Nearby, Hormuz Island appears almost unreal. Its mountains contain red, yellow, white, and ochre soils. The shoreline shifts between cliffs, salt formations, caves, and beaches. The red earth has been used locally in food and art, though increasing tourism raises questions about environmental protection and the removal of natural materials. Baluch communities in southeastern Iran maintain languages and traditions connected to a cultural region extending into Pakistan and Afghanistan. Music, embroidery, food, kinship, and trade cross modern borders. The area's distance from the national center has contributed to both cultural preservation and economic marginalization. The southern coast reveals an Iran shaped by the sea. Its food is spicier. Fish and shrimp become central. Tamarind, dates, chili, and herbs appear more frequently. Music carries African, Arab, Persian, and South Asian echoes. The ocean expands the imagination beyond the plateau. At sunset, fishing boats return as the heat begins to soften. The water turns silver, then orange. Across the strait, ships move toward distant ports. For thousands of years, Iran has looked inland toward mountains and empires. But from these islands, it has also looked outward, toward monsoon winds, open water, and the long roads of the sea. The Strait of Hormuz is both a local seascape and a global pressure point. A large share of the world's traded oil and liquefied natural gas normally passes through or near these waters. In July 2026, renewed United States-Iran strikes again, slowed shipping, and returned the strait to the language of closure, retaliation, and energy shock. From a television studio, Hormuz appears as a strategic choke point. From the shore, it is also a place where fishermen repair nets, children watch ferries, families wait for sailors, and islands depend on fragile ecosystems. The distance between those two views is the distance this documentary is trying to cross. The fastest way to cross that distance is not through another palace or battlefield. It is through a front door. To understand a country, watch how it feeds a guest. In Iran, hospitality often begins before a visitor has fully entered the room. Shoes are removed. A place is prepared. Tea arrives with sugar, dates, sweets, fruit, nuts, or all of them together. The host insists that the guest eat more. The guest refuses politely. The host insists again. This ritual of generosity is part of a wider social language known as tarof, a system of courtesy, modesty, respect, and repeated offers that can confuse outsiders until they learn that the first answer may not be the final answer. Iranian cuisine is often described through kebab and rice, but the real table is far more diverse. Geography determines flavor. The north uses garlic, walnuts, pomegranate, herbs, fish, and sour fruits. The south uses tamarind, chili, dates, seafood, and spices connected to maritime trade. The west is known for rich breads, grilled meats, oils, dairy, and mountain herbs. Central regions develop dishes suited to dry climates and urban court traditions. Rice preparation is an art. Long-grain rice may be soaked, parboiled, drained, and steamed until each grain separates. Saffron adds color and fragrance. Barberries bring sharpness. Dried fruit, nuts, herbs, broad beans, or lentils create countless variations. At the bottom of the pot forms tahdig, the crisp golden layer treasured at the table. It may be made from rice, bread, or sliced potatoes. When the pot is opened, attention turns toward this crust. In many homes, tahdig is not merely food. It is competition, affection, and family politics served on a plate. Stews, or koresh, combine slow cooking with complex balance. Gourmet sabzi uses herbs, beans, dried lime, and meat to create a deep green stew whose flavor depends on patience. Fesenjan brings together ground walnuts and pomegranate, producing a sauce that can be sweet, sour, or both. Gaymay combines split peas, dried lime, tomato, and meat, often topped with thin fried potatoes. Kebabs may be the most internationally familiar dishes, but they are only one part of the table. Kubide, saffron chicken, grilled tomatoes, fresh herbs, yogurt, pickles, and flatbreads appear in many homes and restaurants, while regional cooking changes dramatically from the Caspian coast to the southern ports. Bread is equally important. Flatbreads such as lavash, sangak, barbari, and taftoon have different textures and methods of baking. In traditional bakeries, dough is stretched, shaped, and placed into hot ovens while customers wait nearby. Fresh bread may travel home wrapped in cloth or carried openly, still warm. A plate of basil, mint, tarragon, radish, and scallion may sit beside yogurt with cucumber, sharp pickles, and a glass of Doug. In the north, smoked eggplant, garlic, walnuts, and pomegranate create sour, earthy flavors. In the south, fish and shrimp meet tamarind and chili. In Tabriz, kufte can become a meal large enough to feel architectural. Sweets carry their own map: Gaz from Isfahan, Sohan from Qom, Kotab from Yazd, Mascati from Shiraz, saffron ice cream, rosewater pastries, nougat, brittle, and cardamom-scented cookies. But tea is the constant. Tea is the constant. It is poured into small clear glasses, often strong and amber-colored. Some drink it with a sugar cube held between the teeth. Tea marks arrival, negotiation, rest, condolence, business, and friendship. The Iranian table is not only about taste, it is a social structure. People sit together, share dishes, offer the best portion to others, and continue conversation long after eating. Recipes pass through families, changing slightly with each generation. In a country repeatedly transformed by migration, war, revolution, and economic pressure, food carries continuity. A grandmother's stew, the smell of rice and saffron, or the sound of bread being torn can return a person instantly to a particular home. Civilizations are preserved in monuments. They are also preserved in kitchens. Hospitality is real, but it should not be turned into a stereotype that asks every Iranian to perform warmth for an outsider. Like every society, Iran contains generosity and impatience, intimacy and distance. What matters is that food remains one of the strongest ways people build trust when public life feels uncertain. That same desire to preserve a world inside ordinary objects appears in Iranian art. Iranian art often begins with patience. A carpet may require months or years of work. A miniature painter controls a brush fine enough to shape a face smaller than a fingernail. A calligrapher repeats a line until movement and balance become inseparable. A musician spends years learning a repertoire that is not simply memorized but absorbed. The Persian carpet is one of the most recognizable artistic traditions in the world, yet there is no single Persian carpet. Designs, colors, knots, materials, and techniques vary by region, town, workshop, tribe, and family. Urban carpets from centers such as Kashan, Tabriz, Isfahan, and Kerman may use highly detailed floral or medallion patterns. Village and nomadic carpets can be more geometric, with motifs carrying local memory and improvisation. Wool is washed, spun, and dyed. Natural dyes may come from madder root, indigo, pomegranate skin, walnut husk, and other materials. The weaver follows a design or works from inherited visual knowledge. A carpet organizes the world into a rectangle. Borders create protection. Central fields suggest gardens, architecture, animals, stars, flowers, or abstract movement. A portable textile can become floor, bed, wall, dowry, inheritance, investment, and record of identity. Calligraphy carries language into visual art. Persian scripts such as Nastaliq transform poetry into movement. Letters rise, fall, stretch, and connect. The meaning of a verse and the beauty of its form become one experience. Architecture gathers these disciplines together. Tilework covers domes and gateways. Brick becomes geometry. Muqarnas breaks an arch into hundreds of small transitions. Mirrorwork turns a room into moving light. The surface is never merely a surface. It becomes an argument that order can be created from complexity. Iranian classical music is built around a system known as the radif, a collection of melodic models transmitted through teachers and performers. Instruments such as the tar, setar, santur, kamanche, ney, and tombak create a sound world capable of intimacy and intensity. Performance often balances structure and improvisation. The musician learns inherited material deeply enough to move within it. This is a familiar Iranian artistic principle: freedom achieved through discipline. Regional traditions widen the soundscape. Kurdish and Lur music carries the energy of the Zagros. Azerbaijani forms connect the northwest to the Caucasus. Southern rhythms remember the sea and exchanges with Arab and African communities. Khorasan preserves bardic lineages, while Baluch musicians sustain distinctive instruments and vocal traditions. Modern Iranian art also thrives through photography, cinema, graphic design, installation, popular music, and digital culture. Iranian filmmakers have gained global recognition for using subtle storytelling, ordinary settings, and moral complexity. Restrictions have often forced artists to develop indirect languages, where a small gesture can carry political or emotional weight. This does not mean censorship creates art. Artists create despite censorship. But throughout Iranian history, creators have learned to speak through metaphor, ambiguity, and form. Poetry says one thing and suggests another. A garden becomes a vision of justice. A love song becomes a memory of freedom. A carpet hides the infinite inside repetition. Beauty in Iran is rarely presented as effortless. It is woven, cut, polished, tuned, memorized, and revised. It emerges from long attention. That may be why the arts have survived so many dynasties. Power demands monuments to itself. Art learns how to live after power is gone. Imagine a weaver tying one knot, then another, knowing the final pattern may take years to appear. That is also a useful image for Iran itself. No single century reveals the design. Only distance allows the fragments to become a whole. Once a year, that long history is gathered onto a table. Every spring, Iran begins again. Nowruz means new day. It arrives at the moment of the spring equinox, when the Iranian calendar turns and winter gives way to a new year. The celebration is ancient, shared across many countries and communities, and deeply connected to ideas of renewal, nature, family, and hope. Preparation begins well before the new year. Homes are cleaned from top to bottom in a tradition known as kane tekani, shaking the house. Carpets are washed, curtains are cleaned, old objects are repaired or replaced, new clothes may be purchased. The physical act of cleaning becomes a moral and emotional preparation for change. In the final days before Nowruz, markets fill with flowers, sweets, nuts, fruit, candles, decorations, and the ingredients for the Haft-Seen table. Families arrange 7 symbolic items whose Persian names begin with the letter S. Common elements include sabzeh, green sprouts, sib, apples, sur, garlic, senjed, dried oleaster fruit, somak, sumac, sirke, vinegar, and samanu, a sweet paste made from germinated wheat. Other objects may be added: a mirror, candles, painted eggs, coins, poetry, sacred texts, water, or family photographs. The arrangement varies by household. What matters is the act of creating a small symbolic universe inside the home. At the exact moment of the equinox, families gather around the Haft-Seen table. They embrace, exchange greetings, and begin the new year together. Elders may give money or gifts to younger relatives. Over the following days, families visit one another in a pattern that reinforces social bonds. Food fills the holiday: sweets, fruit, nuts, tea, and dishes such as sabzi polo with fish, where green herbs echo the return of spring. Nowruz continues for nearly 2 weeks. On the 13th day, known as Sizda Bedar, families leave their homes for parks, gardens, riverbanks, and countryside picnics. The sprouts grown for Haft-Seen are returned to nature, symbolically carrying away the old year's misfortune. The festival crosses religious, ethnic, and national boundaries. Muslims, Zoroastrians, secular families, and many communities across the wider region celebrate in different ways. Nowruz survived changes of dynasty, conquest, religious transformation, modernization, migration, and political pressure because it is flexible. It belongs to family life as much as public culture. For Iranians living abroad, Nowruz can become even more important. A table arranged in Toronto, London, Los Angeles, Sydney, Berlin, or Dubai creates a temporary homeland. The smell of hyacinth, the taste of samanu, or the sound of a familiar song reconnects scattered generations. The celebration also reveals something essential about Iranian civilization. Its sense of time is not only linear. History does not simply move away from the past. It returns through ritual. Every year, the same symbols are arranged, but the people around them have changed. Children grow, elders disappear. New family members arrive. The table remains, while life moves around it. Nowruz is ancient because it knows how to become new. Nowruz may be the clearest answer to the question that began this journey. Iranian civilization survives not by repeating the past exactly, but by renewing it. The table remains recognizable. The people around it change, but renewal is not automatic. History can return as celebration, and it can return as unfinished conflict. To understand the Iran of today, the journey must finally face the political century that shaped nearly every living family. No honest journey through Iran can remain entirely in the beauty of the past. The modern country has been shaped by foreign intervention, struggles over constitutional government, oil, monarchy, revolution, war, sanctions, political repression, social movements, and repeated arguments about the meaning of independence. Oil transformed Iran's relationship with global power. Foreign control over resources created deep resentment. In the early 1950s, Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh nationalized the oil industry. In 1953, a coup supported by British and American intelligence removed him from power and strengthened the monarchy of Mohammad Reza Shah. The Shah pursued rapid modernization, industrial development, education, land reform, and closer ties with the West. But political participation remained restricted, inequality persisted, and the security state repressed opposition. Modernization changed cities and social expectations, while also producing anger among groups who felt excluded, threatened, or silenced. In 1979, a broad revolutionary movement overthrew the monarchy. Islamists, leftists, nationalists, liberals, workers, students, clerics, and many ordinary citizens participated, though they imagined very different futures. The Islamic Republic that emerged consolidated power under a new religious political system. Soon after, Iraq invaded Iran. The war lasted from 1980 to 1988 and caused enormous loss on both sides. Iranian cities were bombed. Soldiers fought in trenches and marshes. Families lost children. Border provinces were devastated. The war became central to the political identity of the new state and to the personal memory of millions. Later decades brought reconstruction, population growth, educational expansion, political struggle, sanctions, inflation, migration, and recurring protest. Different generations developed different relationships to the revolution. For some, it represents independence and sacrifice. For others, it represents lost freedom, economic hardship, or an imposed ideology. Many families contain all of these views at once. The condition of women has become one of the most visible and contested areas of Iranian life. Women are highly present in education, medicine, art, business, science, and public culture, while also facing legal and social restrictions. Debates over dress, family law, employment, political authority, and personal freedom reach into everyday life. Young Iranians are connected to global culture through technology, language learning, music, cinema, fashion, gaming, and social media. Even when access is filtered or restricted, they inherit a country with enormous cultural confidence and serious economic uncertainty. Many dream of leaving, Many leave and remain emotionally attached. Others choose to stay and build lives within the limitations around them. Modern politics often encourages outsiders to divide Iranians into two simple categories: supporters of the state and opponents of the state. Real life is more complicated. People may criticize the government while defending the country. They may reject foreign intervention while demanding internal change. They may value religious tradition while opposing religious rule. They may feel pride in Iran's history and pain about its present. This complexity matters because nations are not identical to governments. A country is also its people, landscapes, languages, memories, food, music, family ties, and arguments. The headlines are not false. Iran is a major political actor, and the consequences of state decisions are real. But headlines often compress human beings into symbols. A teacher becomes the Iranian public. A student becomes the opposition. A soldier becomes the regime. A migrant becomes the diaspora. The camera must move closer. Inside an apartment, a family worries about prices. In a hospital, a doctor begins another shift. At a university, students prepare for exams. In a workshop, an artisan finishes a tile. At a cemetery, a mother remembers a son. In a cafe, friends imagine a future they cannot yet see. This is modern Iran. Not a single political story, but millions of lives lived under the weight of history. In 2026, renewed armed hostilities added another layer of fear and uncertainty. International coverage focused on military targets, oil routes, missiles, and diplomatic demands. Inside the country, civilians face the consequences that strategic language often hides: disrupted lives, economic pressure, anxiety for relatives, grief, and an even narrower space for public expression. At the same time, criticism of the Iranian state must not become permission to treat Iranian society as expendable. Opposition to foreign attack and opposition to domestic repression can exist in the same person. Pride in Iran and anger at its government can exist in the same family. These are not contradictions to be solved by outsiders. They are realities people live. This is why the difference between a country and a government matters. Governments issue orders. Countries contain childhoods, cemeteries, jokes, recipes, rival football teams, regional accents, private beliefs, and memories that cannot be reduced to policy. After a journey across Iran, the headlines do not disappear. They become smaller. They take their place inside a much larger story. The politics remain, the conflicts remain, the restrictions, inequalities, environmental crises, and arguments about the future remain. A documentary that ignores them would be incomplete, but a documentary that sees only them would also be incomplete. It is also Kurdish music in the Zagros, Azerbaijani conversation in the Tabriz Bazaar, Arabic poetry in Khuzestan, Baluch embroidery near the Gulf of Oman, Armenian churches in the northwest, Zoroastrian fire in Yazd, Jewish memory in ancient cities, and Persian verse spoken across them all. It is a country where a garden can represent paradise, a carpet can contain a universe, and a poem can say what public speech cannot. Iran is also the things no monument can hold: the sound of spoons against tea glasses, a taxi driver's joke in traffic, a grandmother correcting a recipe, a young person switching between languages online, a family calling someone who left years ago, and the silence that enters a room when the news becomes personal. It is a civilization that has repeatedly faced conquest and transformation without becoming a museum of itself. The Achaemenids fell, the Parthians rose, the Sasanians fell. Islam transformed the land. Persian returned as a literary force. Turkic and Mongol dynasties became patrons of Persian culture. The Safavids created a new religious and political identity. The Qajars confronted European power. The Pahlavis pursued modernization. Revolution created another state. War and sanctions reshaped another generation. Through every change, ordinary people continued the work of continuity. They repaired water channels, copied manuscripts, wove carpets, cooked family dishes, taught children poems, planted trees, protected shrines, rebuilt after earthquakes, carried keys to homes they had left, returned to graves, prepared the half-seen table when another spring arrived. This may be the most important truth about Iran. Its civilization is not hidden because it vanished. It is hidden because the modern world often looks too quickly. We see a government and forget a society. We see a crisis and forget a landscape. We see ideology and forget humor. We see ancient ruins and forget the people living beside them. We see beauty and sometimes forget pain. We see pain and sometimes refuse to believe in beauty. To see Iran clearly requires holding all of these realities at once. There is no need to romanticize the country. Iran does not need to become a fantasy of hospitality, poetry, and turquoise domes. Its people are not symbols created to correct foreign stereotypes. They are individuals with different beliefs, ambitions, frustrations, and memories. The purpose of travel, whether physical or through film, is not to replace one simple image with another. It is to make simplicity impossible. The purpose of this journey was not to decide whether Iran is ancient or modern, religious or secular, welcoming or severe, victim or power. It is all of these in different places, at different times, and in the lives of different people. The closer the camera moves, the less useful the simple labels become. At the end of the journey, we return to dawn. Light reaches the mountains. A city wakes. Bread enters an oven. A train crosses a bridge built through difficult terrain. A woman opens a shop. A child walks to school. A farmer checks the sky. An old man turns the page of a book of poetry. The country enters another day carrying thousands of years behind it. And somewhere beneath the noise of traffic, prayer, machinery, argument, and news, the older voice continues. It says that empires are temporary. Water must be protected. Guests must be welcomed. Beauty requires patience. Memory requires responsibility. And every spring, no matter how difficult the winter, the world can begin again. That is the civilization hidden behind the headlines. Not a lost world waiting to be discovered, but a living society that was there the entire time, carrying the past into another uncertain